The precinct committee project is the next thing on the agenda, and how we can change the Democratic Party. And I want to emphasize the word change because when we started this project 4 years ago, um, the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, I should say many members of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party said that the Cuyahoga County Progressive Caucus was out to destroy the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. And, that kind of took on, and that was in, the heightened tensions of the Bernie wing of the party and the Hillary wing of the party at the time. Um, so, you know, please, in conversations, don't ever say that we're out to destroy the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. We're out to change it. And I guess you could say, well, changing something is destroying it as it is. But basically, what we're trying to do is work within the process that they have established, which is a democratic process. And I want to go through the basics when we get to the PowerPoint presentation, but the precinct committee leaders, who are also the central committee members of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, they elect the party chair, they elect the party officers, they elect executive committee members who vote on endorsements, and they also have the power to change the bylaws. So we're trying to get a majority of precinct committee leaders, central committee leaders, so we can change the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. Okay, it's not like an inside coup. And if we were to get a majority, then of course, the majority control things in any legislative body. Right now, we have about 20% of the Central Committee members in the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. We're not a majority. We do have enough executive committee members that we have blocked endorsements in the past. But we're starting a year out. Last time we couldn't really start this far out because it was known that Stu Garson was going to resign as party chair and that there was going to be a special election for his replacement for a year before the regular election in 2018. So we're starting a year out. There are about 900 precincts in Cuyahoga County. About 200 of them don't have a precinct committee leader. It's very hard, to find people in these positions. So what we're going to do tonight is explain how the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party operates, explain what the precinct committee person, central committee person does, explain how you become one, and then there are two action steps in the future. First of all, if what we described to you tonight interests you, let me know and we'll have a one-on-one conversation. And then the second thing is we've got to get to as many activist organizations, as many groups that can help us on this as possible. Because like I said, there are about 900 precincts in Cuyahoga County. Deb, can we get the slideshow going, or the PowerPoint? Okay, the precinct project, understanding the precinct leader's role in the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. We will send this to you in the email tomorrow if you would like to view it again. Next slide. Okay, this slide shows what the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party considers to be affinity groups. Progressive Caucus, Ohio Democratic Party, the Women's Caucus, and the Stonewall Democrats. Now, affinity group means that there's simply an affiliation. And the way I have always explained the Cuyahoga County Progressive Caucus relationship with the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party is we work with the party when we can, and we work outside of it when we cannot. And the perfect example of when we cannot is all of the issues that we've worked on. The Cuyahoga County Democratic Party never works on issues. We feel that the party should because that would help the party's image, but they don't. And there's a variety of reasons for this. But we, like the Women's Caucus and the Stonewall Democrats, from time to time endorse different candidates. But perfect example being last year's general election, where we had to defeat Donald Trump. We work with the party when we can. Next slide. Okay, those are the Democratic Party officers. Chantel Brown is the chair. Kevin Kelly is the vice chair. Executive director is still an open position. Many of you know Ryan Puente. He resigned at the first of the year. He's now Cleveland mayoral candidate Justin Bibb's campaign manager. These officers are elected by the Central Committee, and it's done every 4 years. The last election was in 2018. The next election is 2022, next year. And what happens is the Central Committee members are elected in the May primary. Okay. And you have to vote, Democratic vote. We're going to see this in a future slide. And then after the new Central Committee members are elected, about a month later in June, the new party chair and the party officers are elected for a 4-year term. Next up. Okay, organization of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. And we're going to explain how this is done in a minute. There's executive committee and central committee. Now, the executive committee is either elected by central committee members or appointed. Now, the appointments are by what's called the city leader, but they have to be approved by the party chair. Democratic clubs exist, and they're a very good thing within the party structure, but they do not actually have a say in the party organization. The bylaws are a huge part of the organization. Those hardly ever change, but that's one of the things that we would like to do if we should get a majority of central committee members. Now, the last thing, this is kind of important. The central committee members or the Cuyahoga County, they do not directly report to the Ohio Democratic Party. They have to follow, and we're actually in the process of looking into this, okay? The County Democratic Party has to follow certain bylaws of the Ohio Democratic Party, which has to follow certain bylaws of the Democratic National Committee or the National Democratic Party. But the Central Committee actually is the local governing body of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. And one of the things, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but one of the things that the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party does, which they say they have to do because they are following National Democratic Party rules, is any election, you kind of think of secret ballot as a given. It's not by secret ballot. If you're a Central Committee member and you're voting on the party chair, everybody knows who you voted for. If you're an executive committee member and you're voting on an endorsement, everybody knows who you're voting for. Now, if you think of this in the context of what a lot of people think about the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, that it's ruled by party bosses and it's ruled by intimidation, favors, all of that, what better way to enforce that type of behavior than to have every vote not be a secret ballot? But again, that comes from the National Democratic Party, and that's one of the things we want to do, is to try to change that. Next slide, please. Okay, we kind of mentioned some of this before. The Central Committee is the former governing body of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, made up of precinct leaders, vote for party leadership and the ward or city leaders. Now, the next part is the grassroots leadership and link between the party and precinct residents. One of the things that precinct committee people, central committee members are supposed to do is during the time of a general election, make sure all the Democrats in the precinct vote. Okay, this is not a hard task. Precincts, are very small. The reality is most precinct committee people don't do that part of their job. Most around the county show up and vote when there's elections because maybe they took the position because their friend, a party boss or a city leader, called them up and asked them to do it. During the midterms in 2018, the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party told us in no uncertain terms that the majority of precinct committee people who actually did their job and got people out to vote were the precinct committee members who were also Cuyahoga County Progressive Caucus members. And I'm looking around, I see a number of you, in this room. So that's a very good look for the Progressive Caucus. The last part may be called upon to vote in specialized elections within the party. You might remember a couple months ago when County Council District 3 position became open when Dan Brady resigned. It was the Central Committee members in County Council District 3 who picked his replacement. And one of the things that, the Cuyahoga County government has with their council members is should a resignation occur in the middle of the term, it's the party of the person who resigns who picks the replacement to fill out the term. So that became all of a sudden, I think there were about 85 Central Committee members in County Council District 3. They had to pick the replacement. Now, you may have seen that the ultimate machine politician, Martin Sweeney, won that Central Committee vote and became the county council person for District 3. But it was very, very close. We're at the point now where we can make these elections close. Were there no dissent in the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party, a Central Committee election like that one, Martin Sweeney would have won near unanimous, if there wasn't an organized movement. And what I'm saying is we need more people to stop things like that. Another example of where Central Committee members may be called on. There was a few years ago, Nick Celebrezzi, who was the state representative candidate in, I forget the number, but the district in Parma. He decided after the primary that he wanted to retire. I don't think he actually retired. He moved. But anyways, he couldn't be on the ballot anymore. So the Central Committee members in his state rep district got to vote on a candidate who would be on the ballot in the November election. So, you see when something like that comes up, if you're a Central Committee member in that particular instance, you have a very important role to fill. Next slide, please. Okay, we put a separate slide in on this because this is often confusing to folks. Well, what's a Central Committee? What's Central Committee and precinct? It's the same thing. I think precinct leader refers to the role that person does on the ground in their precinct at election time. And Central Committee refers to what that person does in their role as governing body of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. But it's the same person, the same thing. Next, please. Executive Committee. Executive Committee exists only in the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party to vote on endorsements. Now, that's a very important role, but the Central Committee actually governs the party bylaws and could actually change the role of the executive committee, which is kind of something we would like to see happen. It's a subgroup of the Central Committee in this sense. After every election, and again, the next election is next year in 2020, all of the elected Central Committee members in a community or a ward, each Cleveland suburb has, their own Central Committee members. Each Cleveland ward, which is about the size of, an average suburb, has their own. Some of the really small communities are combined into one entity. But anyways, the Central Committee members get together and they do two things. They elect a city leader and they elect executive committee members from that community. And the number of executive committee members is basically determined by population. Like, as you might guess, larger suburbs like Lakewood, Euclid, Westlake will have more Central Committee members than smaller suburbs in Cleveland wards. And they will also actually have more Central Committee members because they will have more precincts within their community. But the Central Committee members elect executive committee members. Now, if the Central Committee members do not elect the number of executive committee members for that community, then the rest of the executive committee members are appointed. The Central Committee members also elect a city leader for their community. It's the executive committee members then that vote on all endorsements. Now, the endorsements they vote on are only the endorsements, that their community is in a district of. So the only time all of the countywide executive committee would vote would be on judicial endorsements. And actually, the only other thing would be county executive endorsement. But, for example, when they vote on an endorsement for the Cleveland mayor's election, it will only be the Cleveland executive committee members that vote on that endorsement. Now, one of the things in the county bylaws right now, and again, I want to reiterate that Central Committee members can change the county bylaws. If the executive committee votes on an endorsed candidate, then all Democrats must support that endorsed candidate. And if you don't, you won't be eligible for an endorsement in the future. This has created great bitterness within the party because a lot of time there's multiple Democrats running in a primary. And if the party endorses one person, supporters of the candidate who don't get endorsed get very bitter and angry because if they're an elected official, they can't voice their support for a candidate. One of the things that we feel very strongly about is if the party did not endorse in primaries, two things would happen. One, there would be no bitterness that these endorsements sometimes cause. And two, energy can be focused on the general election against the Republicans. But for right now, these endorsements done by the executive committee members, and this becomes where the power structure of the party, makes their imprint. See, and if you follow with what I told you before about how none of the votes are secret votes, if the party insiders, the party bosses, want somebody to get an endorsement, it's very easy to promise and to intimidate folks into supporting that endorsement. Next slide. Okay, precinct leaders. I think we've gone over this before. People that represent their constituents. Every 4 years, the vote is always in the primary election in a midterm year. I think we also mentioned that precinct leaders vote for the city leaders. and they campaign in their precincts prior to their elections. Quick note on the endorsements. Before an actual endorsement vote is made by the executive committee, city leaders get together. Now, this is kind of non-binding, but in the power structure, it actually can become binding. The city leaders get together and they vote on a recommended endorsement, and it's usually a week, before the actual executive committee votes on the endorsement. Now, some city leaders within the power structure try to convince their executive committee members that they have to all vote the same way. And some communities have had city or ward leaders that have intimidated their executive committee members to do just that. And some unscrupulous city leaders and ward leaders will actually go so far to say, well, we've got to go what the city leaders recommended. Okay. I'm actually a city leader myself, and I've sat in on a few of these meetings over the next few years. That is major power politics at its best, in what they try to convince the city leaders to do. Now, again, we can change that if we get a majority of central committees of people elected who can elect the majority of city leaders. Next slide. Okay, precinct leaders are elected by the voters in their precinct. That's in the primary, the Democratic Party primary, in the midterms. Now, on the ballot, it says central committee member, okay? And if you are a voter, in the midterms, you will have a vote for state representative. You might have a vote for you'll have a vote for state representative. You'll have a vote for your congressperson. You might have a vote for Senate. You might have some issues. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom of your ballot, you'll see vote for Democratic Party Central Committee member. I would say 90% of voters, when they scroll down and they see vote for your Democratic Party Central Committee member, have no idea what it is, may think it even sounds communist because it's Central Committee, and they won't vote. A lot of these Central Committee elections come out to 8-0. One candidate is running unopposed. And the reason they come out 8-0 is because only that candidate's friends need to vote for him or her. Okay. How do you get someone to know what Central Committee is and who their precinct committee leader is? You have to knock on doors and campaign. If you knock on the door and you introduce yourself, I'm running for precinct committee leader. First thing the person will say, well, what's that? Then you explain it to them. But then they will remember that you knocked on their door. It's in very, very rare occasions where you get a contested precinct committee leader election where both candidates campaign. Now, most of the traditional structure of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party was, okay, that's my precinct. I'm on the ballot. Okay, I'm going to get it. Last time what happened is a number of them were stunned to find out that there was somebody else on the ballot. And they were even more stunned to find out that that person was campaigning against them. See, so you may have a contested election, but we'll walk you through this. It's not that hard if you're willing to knock on doors and campaign. Now, after the Central Committee members are elected, and I think we mentioned at the outset that there's still about 200 vacancies. Executive committee people can appoint Central Committee members to a vacant precinct. And how that works is, well, there's hundreds of precinct committee people. Sometimes people move. Well, you can't be the precinct committee leader in the community if you're not living there anymore. So then there becomes an opening and an appointment is made. Sometimes, people aren't elected to a precinct, but then a year later, somebody says, hey, I would like to do that precinct committee in that precinct. And so then there's an appointment made. The executive committee actually approves these precinct committee leader appointments. And they almost always do that because it's better to have somebody in the precinct position than to not. But anybody who's appointed or anybody who is elected must run for re-election in the next 4-year cycle, which again is going to be in 2022. Next slide. We mentioned that already, about 200 vacancies in Cuyahoga County. And I think we're getting close to the end. The city or ward leader. Again, I think we already mentioned this. They're elected by the precinct, the precinct leaders in their community. They are automatically an executive committee member. And they're generally supposed to oversee their own central committee members or precinct committee members' efforts during an election cycle. Next slide. Okay, again, I think we've covered this. You need 5 signatures to get on the ballot. And it's like, any other petition where you're running for an elected office, which precinct committee is an elected office. Now, these 5 signatures have to be Democrats. It's not that hard because the likelihood is 5 Democrats that live in your precinct. And what we did last time, and I'm reasonably certain we'll do the same thing again, is we will have the petition forms available for you to print out so that you don't have to go down to the County Board of Elections and get one yourself. We also actually last time turned in a number of people's petitions, but again, we'll help you in all of this process. The primary election in the midterms is in May. Petitions are always due 90 days before an election, so that will be sometime in February of next year. Next slide. Okay, this is about the Ohio Democratic Party. One of the things that's happened is their budget has been drastically cut because their fundraising is real low. And I think that's it. Thank you very much, Deb, for flipping the slides. And do we have questions in the chat or live? I'm trying to look at the chat. It's my experience that precinct leaders are very territorial. I've heard some bad stories. Well, there are bad stories, but there are good stories as well. And I'm looking around here at some very good precinct committee leaders. If by territorial you mean they're knocking on your door at election time urging you to vote, that's it. That's a good thing, right? But if by territorial you mean that, wait a minute, this is my precinct, how dare you run against me? Well, you're supposed to run for re-election every 4 years. You're allowed to run if you get 5 signatures and get on the ballot. See, but the territorial in a negative way means that that person is angry because they want to retain what they feel is a power position to vote on the endorsements. Unaffiliated can also sign the petition. I forgot to mention that.
Steve, you have a question from Alan. He has his hand up.
Okay, I was reading the chat ones first, and let me just see. Okay, Alan, go ahead.
More a comment, just since we're talking about this, those of us who are currently on the central executive committee committees, it's always a good idea to double check the county parties list, because they are horribly disorganized. And I'm now noticing that despite being a central and executive committee member, after this most recent vacancy filling, I'm currently not listed on either, despite paying my dues and having been appointed to my current precinct when I moved within the ward. So just another thing to be on the lookout for as committee members from the powers that be.
Alan, I'm saying this sarcastically, that your switch in precinct only occurred a few months ago. They usually only update that every 2 or 3 years.
No, they've updated it to show who filled my vacancy, but they didn't update it to show my new precinct. So I'm just not on the list at all anymore.
Well, no, I was being sarcastic with that, that, you know, that's how they are.
Actually, the executive committee list that's online right now is not the executive committee list. They've just put a duplicate link to the central committee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just for those of us who are committee members or are considering becoming committee members, you have to watch the county party leadership, because they won't always pay attention and keep things organized.
Can I say one thing to that, Steve?
Sure.
To Alan, to let you know, the last election when we did the 2018, it was over a year later that I was still calling the Board of Elections and the Democratic Party to get an updated list done. And both of them were blaming the other person, of course. But it took like a year and a half before they had finally got the 2018 on, it was like the end of 2019 before they finally had our information up. So that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Steve Khalil has his hand up.
I see your hand there.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. I just to piggyback on that a little bit, I noticed on the county party website a little while ago that there were 2 different lists depending on which link you clicked. One of them I noticed was updated with some people that we added, and the other one wasn't. Now, it's been a little while since I looked at it, but that might be one of the issues, is that there are 2 lists and they are not, synchronized. So depending on where you click on the website, you might get a different list. So be careful of that.
Yeah, and the website also has the elected executive committee members and the appointed executive committee members on separate lists. So yeah, if you're looking for executive committee members, you got to make sure you have both lists, before you get to all of them. It's messy, and if you picture, we're trying to recruit candidates for 900 different precincts across the county. It's going to be messy.
And Steve, Dennis said he had his hand up.
Hi. Yeah, hi. Is there, as far as I saw the bylaws, there's no conflict of interest bylaw sections, are there? Or do you think that's needed? Are there times when you think party officers are actually engaged in a conflict of interest? They do business with the city, or, there's some circular relationships there that should be addressed?
I do not think there is anything in the bylaws, but one of the things that we want to do, and we're targeting the July meeting to do this, is to talk through suggestions, that we would like to see that it changes in the bylaws.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a lot of people who just take something because it just gives them extra social contact with people they could get contracts from.
Absolutely. And too, like you see, Chantel Brown, is now running, for US Congress. Kevin Kelly is running for mayor of Cleveland. If you are a career politician, being a chair or a vice chair of the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party gets your name out there even more. Right?
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, to quickly wrap this up, our next step, we want to have a meeting in July. We don't have the date set yet, where we talk through possible structural changes that we would like to make in Cuyahoga County Democratic Party. Myself and other activist leaders, we're trying to get in touch with as many other activist groups as possible because, this is a huge project trying to find 900 different candidates to 900 different precincts. But we need people who are interested in doing work in their own community. Like the easiest place to recruit precinct committee members is where you live. Okay, people who are interested in politics, where they live, et cetera, et cetera. If you are interested in doing this within your community, let me know and we'll have a one-on-one conversation. And the easiest way to do this will be simply to answer the email that we send you tomorrow that's going to have all of the links.
Steve, you have one more question, Celeste.
Oh, Celeste, I'm sorry.
Hi, thanks. I'm so sorry. I was multitasking and feeding my kids dinner. Did you say the Ohio Democratic Party had their fundraising, had their funds reduced?
Well, I mean, they exist on contributions. Their contributions are way down, so they've had to cut staff.
All right. That's all right. Okay.
Could I address that real quick, Steve, since I was at the last meeting?
Yeah, Joe is actually the chair of the Ohio Democratic Party Disability Caucus, so he sits in on a lot of meetings.
So yes, money is down. And the issue that they have is with their office space. They are planning on doing something which I totally disagreed with and told Liz that I thought was ridiculous, is that they're looking at getting rid of office space altogether for the state party, which I just personally think that should not be done. But they had a goal of like 2.3 million for each quarter, and they want to raise it up a little, but they got the bank to go in on a new deal on the mortgage for the office space that they got now that they're trying to get rid of. But they are running on a slim team right now. Prime example is that myself and the Asian and Pacific Islander caucus became official caucuses the end of last summer. They still haven't got to the point of adding us to their page of the caucuses. But come this summer, there is supposed to be election, and then I get to be on the state executive committee because being a chair of one of the caucuses. But yeah, right now they are really behind things. And as I've told all my caucus members, that we just need to go out on our own and move ahead and not count on them to do anything. We just have to do it ourselves.
All right. Thank you. I was wondering if I should donate to, because there's so many places to donate that it's really hard to know where is best to allocate your funds.
Right. There's thousands.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Yeah, for people who are willing to donate, there's never a shortage of business.
Yeah, it's really, it's very hard to know the right place.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Anything else?
No.
Yes, Steve, I'm going to say it if you won't. Celeste, donate to CCPC.
Oh yeah, I think that I will. Yeah. And I like the Ohio ranked voting also. That's important.
Somebody wrote in the chat, should the CCBP have a written list of responsibilities? And they do, except nobody really follows it.
They don't even promote it.
Right.
You know,
No, they would just prefer that everything remain quiet and that the precinct, the central committee, the executive committee members just show up and vote for who they're told to vote for in the endorsements. That's how they would prefer to run it. One of the things too, I just to mention in conclusion, Chantel Brown is the current party chair. If she wins that congressional election, I cannot see her staying as party chair. She's going to be in Washington, right? So the likely scenario is that there'll be an interim election for a new party chair until next year. In that scenario, if Nina Turner wins that special election, and all of the prognosticators agree it's between Chantel and me, right? It's not likely to be somebody else. But if Nina Turner wins, the power structure in this county changes dramatically. And Nina has indicated that she wants to be involved with the project that we're working on here. Obviously not until after the special election, and that assumes that she wins. But it's going to be a major, kind of either way, it's going to be a change in party politics. Well, thank you all for coming. I think we're right at the hour and a half mark. It's always hard on Zoom to sit for an hour and a half, but you guys have been great. And, the governor has lifted all restrictions. So I'm thinking maybe it's not that far off where we can be meeting again live. So again, thanks.
Thank you, Steve.